Hey, how's it going? Josh here from Tech with Josh, and this is episode number 24 of Tech with Josh. This episode is titled Flagships of Yesteryear, Phones That Still Hit Different. What do I mean by flagships? Well, flagships are the top of the line phone, and yesteryear means from the past. It just sounds cooler. And the main thing here that we want to talk about is why they hit different. And this is a personal list. Everybody says, hey, you have the Samsung S3. Well, Samsung S3 won't be here. What we're talking about is four phones. First phone is going to be BlackBerry OS. Second phone, Palm OS. Third phone, iOS. And the fourth phone, Android OS. Why is it in that order? Well, it's because of years of release. I want to take you guys back many years to 2007. The first iPhone came out. But Josh, then you just said we're going to talk about BlackBerry. So yes, BlackBerry. Most of you listening to this might have never had a BlackBerry, known what BlackBerry was. Well, BlackBerry was a business phone. What do I mean? BlackBerries had your emails on it. You had Docs to Go. This was the businessman's phone. And as an old school BlackBerry user, it was wonderful. But here's the thing. As I said, it's a businessman's phone. Why does that matter for what I'm about to tell you? Well, they were bricks. It's a slab phone, no touchscreens, anything like that. Back in those days, they came later on with touchscreens. But they originally had jog wheels, which is a wheel on the side. That's how you navigate it. So it wasn't very user-friendly. Then the 8100 series came out, which is the Pearl series. It uses T9 testing where you had to press a number a couple times to get to a letter. So one, you had to press it 3 times to get a C, twice to get a B, things like that. This is how old I am in the phone game, because at that time I started working in the industry that sold phones. But let's get back to this. So the Pearl came out, and it had that. It was an entry-level BlackBerry compared to the 87 series or the 88 series, which are bigger phones with full keyboards, and it has the same trackball from the 8800 series, which made it a lot easier to scroll because, as I said, there was a wheel. So it went up and down because it's a wheel, and left and right by holding a certain button. So if you held the button, it'll go one way. If you didn't, it'll go the other way. So it took some getting used to, and it wasn't really very user-friendly. The BlackBerry phones didn't have a camera either. So that's what made the Pearl such a great phone. It had a camera, and I don't know if you guys know this, iMessage? Well, there was something similar way back in the day called BlackBerry Messenger. BlackBerry Messenger basically is the iMessage of the past, is exclusive to only BlackBerry phones. And it was basically like iMessage, RCS, WhatsApp, but in yesteryear. But the phone that I want to talk about isn't the Curve. Isn't the Pearl, because the Pearl, guess what? Didn't even have a full keyboard. Camera was in, and the headphone jack didn't even have a full size 3.5mm. It had 2.5. That's the even smaller one that you had to have a special adapter, things like that. It was mostly for one bud earpieces. So the phone that got me to switch over to BlackBerry at the time, by the way, I was a Windows Mobile user, and before that I was like a Hip Top or Sidekick, T-Mobile Sidekick. But I was on Windows Mobile, so I was on a smartphone. I got into BlackBerry because of the keyboard was amazing, but the phone that made me want a BlackBerry was the 8300 series. Mine was the 8330, the CDMA version for Sprint, because I worked for Sprint at that time. And let me tell you the specs of this phone. 240 by 320. That's the resolution of the screen. So 240p. It's a 2.5-inch screen, so very small. 312 megahertz processor. 64 megabytes of onboard storage, and a micro SD card expansion. I think it went up to 4 gigs. 1100 milliamp battery. 2 megapixel rear camera. Bluetooth and USB. Mini USB. And that's basically it. There's no 3G. There's no Wi-Fi. And guess what? by having a BlackBerry, you had to have a BlackBerry data plan. Hey Josh, what's that? Well, now in modern times we have unlimited plans with a certain amount of gigs before they throttle you. Well, for BlackBerry, you had to have the BlackBerry Internet plan, which is extra $20, $30 depending on the carrier. And what that allows you to get is push email. What is push email? Well, back in those days, most phones would pull email. You had to go in and pull to refresh. You know how you drag down to check to see if you have a new email? Well, think about you have to go into your email app. You have to press the menu button and hit refresh. And I had to do that on Trios. Had to do that on Windows mobile phones, unless it was Exchange, which is Outlook, ActiveSync. So, BlackBerry, any email you had, guess what? It got pushed directly to your phone once it hit your inbox. That was why BlackBerries were business phones, because emails at that time were big. And to be able to have access to them was amazing. Right then and there, so business owners and those tech bros and all that had Blackberries. Why did I have a Blackberry? It was cool. That keyboard, once you type on a Blackberry, you'll see, hey, this keyboard's amazing. Mr. Mobile Michael Fisher actually did the Clicks keyboard because he liked the Blackberry keyboard. And that's the thing. It's a tactile keyboard, whereas if you look at the Windows mobile phone I was using at the time was a Pocket PC 6800. It was a Sprint variety, so it was the HTC Mobile. It had a slide. It had a touchscreen, by the way. Bigger screen. I could do more with it, but the keyboard sucked. So the reason I switched is because my keyboard went out. I had the phone swapped out. Worked for the company, so I got that swapped out. Gave that phone to my father, and I got a BlackBerry for myself. And I just loved it because, like I said, the keyboard was very user-friendly and you could type without looking. But there's no real apps. It had some apps. As I mentioned, the BlackBerry plan you have to have with it. And I had my work email on that phone. So whatever IT policies Sprint had, I was stuck to. So if I couldn't go to the site on the Sprint side, I couldn't go to the site on my phone. But emails, messaging, camera, I barely used it, but it's a great phone. And it made Blackberries fun. And guess what? After that phone, they started putting out bangers, but that's the flagship that was it for me. It was the phone that hit different. Next, a couple years later, we're going down to 2009. By the way, I had the BlackBerry. You know why I also had a Palm phone? Why did I have a Palm phone? Well, Palm OS was amazing. What do I mean by Palm OS was amazing? Well, it fit in your palm, no. But seriously, Palm OS gave you certain apps, certain games, because it had been around since the 90s with the Palm Pilots, things like that. And Palm did certain things in the original Palm OS or Handspring OS that phones didn't really do. Prime example, you had an infrared port. Infrared, what's that? Well, phones in America don't really have it. It's something that you could control TVs with, stuff like that. Like a lot of Chinese Android phones have it, but with Palm it was different because you had what was known as beam. What is beam? Well, you stick two phones together, you line up the ports, and you can send information over. You're like, that doesn't sound impressive. Well, as I mentioned, the BlackBerry Curve that I just talked about, they have Wi-Fi, had like Bluetooth 1.0. You couldn't really do data transfers on the BlackBerry with Bluetooth. It's mostly through email or by syncing it. Well, Palm OS put two phones across from each other, and guess what? You could send contact lists between phones, and you can actually filter by certain categories. Hey, you could send applications between phones. You got an application offline, and you want to send it to your buddy. Here, let's line up phones. Boom. So things like that. It was great. And I don't know if you're old enough to know this, all these phones, to sync it to your computer, to save your information, you had to plug it in. What do I mean? Each phone of the time had its own software. You had the BlackBerry Device Manager. You had to plug it in. start syncing, you just see a progression bar. Palm had something called HotSync. I mentioned Windows Mobile. Windows Mobile had ActiveSync. Plug it in, saves everything to your Outlook, for your contacts, your emails, things like that. This is the time we lived in. Even Android wasn't really a thing with syncing. You to do software updates, you had to plug it in. iPhone to do software updates, you had to plug it in to iTunes, and that's how you backed up your stuff. There was no cloud. And here's the thing: Palm goes, "Hey, our operating system's been around since the 90s. It's the same exact operating system, same layout, stylus, things like that. Industry's changing. Well, let's release the Palm Pre. Sprint exclusive with the original Palm Pre, and this phone was the phone." So here's the thing. I worked at Sprint, as I mentioned, with the BlackBerry story at this time. And in the Sprint store I worked in is in the city. It's no longer there. Sprint's not even a company, and that store been closed down. But the store I worked for, we had an actual event with tech writers, bloggers come in to play with the phone before it was out. So it was a big deal. Because in all my time for Sprint, I've never been a part of something like that. A launch that we actually had tech writers, big known writers for like Gizmodo, stuff like that, actually there playing with the device. And you know how the iPhones had lines? In my Sprint store, there was never a line to this point for any launch. We had like Samsung Instinct, we had a bunch of different things that came out. The Palm Pre was that phone that people lined up for. It's Manhattan. Manhattan blocks are long, and that line, well, a corner store went around, and no lie, we had at least 50 people outside. And I was out there on the line, taking down names and numbers to make sure people couldn't jump the line. We had a queue system to work. We had to lock the door, let people in. It was insane for me. So it's nostalgic, but here's the thing. I also came out online when they went around taking pictures of the lineups. I think it was Gizmodo for this one. You could see the back of my head at that Sprint store. But here's the thing. The phone was so different. I've done posts about this, rent posts. The Palm Pre was that phone. What do I mean? I mentioned about syncing, about updates. The reason I mentioned that, because Palm goes, we're going to change the game. Guess what? Your updates, wireless. You know what? When you set up your phone, we're going to give you a cloud account to store all of your information. You don't have to plug in unless you want to. You don't understand how revolutionary that was in 2009, because now we have iCloud, we have Google device backup. Back then, none of this existed. You had a USB cable, you plugged in, and guess what? Each phone had a different kind of port. iPhone had a 30 pin. Android had mini USB. BlackBerry had mini USB. Palm had its own port. I don't even know how to describe it. If you gotta look it up, because it had a sync port that's a bunch of pins, but they're like contacts, so it's not like the iPod. But then it has a little square charging port as well. It's a weird port. You had Nokia's that had its own thing. So everything had its own port. So Palm goes, yeah, we're gonna take that out. You guys like MagSafe, right? You guys are doing wireless charging. Teslas have it. Most cars have wireless chargers. Guess what? In 2009, Palm goes, we have the technology. Touchstone. You bought a back and you bought a little, basically, MagSafe charger for layman's term, but you bought the little puck and you could stick the back of your phone on there and it would charge. Now, wait. By the way, this wasn't new technology, because my BlackBerry Curve actually had that. It had 2 pins by the battery door, and you could buy the BlackBerry dock and charge it off of that. So it had 2 copper connections, positive and negative, and you just line up and it send power that way. But with the Palm, it was more widespread. Because the BlackBerry, unless you're a techie like I was, you wouldn't know about that. The stores wouldn't carry that because nobody would buy it. So with the Palm, we had those touchstones back. Guess what? iPhone 10 comes out. And everybody's like, oh my God, gestures. You see those cards? Yeah, that's amazing, right? Yeah, you know what? Palm did that first. In 2009, Palm had multitasking that you can have apps open in the background with cards. And guess what? You did a gesture to show all of them. That's what's insane. The Palm Pre had the software. It had that card view. It had multitasking. Why am I making a big deal about multitasking? Because unless you lived in that era and had smartphones in that era, you don't understand. Phones didn't multitask. You had an app open, you had to go back to the main screen to switch between it. Later on, Android had, like, HTC phones had 6 recent apps, things like that. iPhone didn't come out with it until iOS like 4.3 or 4.2 when the 4S was out, basically. And for that, it just showed you at the bottom. And if they ran them back when they did, if they didn't, they didn't, you know? With Palm, it had all that. And it has what's called synergy. Basically, it'll have your contacts. And if you have them on Facebook, it'll have their Facebook right there as well. If you have AOL Instant Messenger, what's that? It's an IM program. If you had them on there, it'll have them there. And while you're texting them, you could switch between which one you want. If you want to text them, if you want to hit them up on AOL or Facebook, it just worked. And it was a great software. The problem with it, before you go, oh, so great, where is it now? It was not enough development. The App Store killed it, poor hardware, but it was cool. And now let me tell you the specs. I've been rambling for like 10 minutes about this phone. 320 by 480. So it's a little bit more crisp than the BlackBerry. Also a LCD rather than the TFT. TFT, less color accuracy, stuff like that. It's a blend display. It doesn't get that bright. But here's the thing. It was a touchscreen 3.1 inch, 600 megahertz processor, nothing big, 256 megabytes RAM, and it had 8 gigs of storage. There was no expansion, and the battery life 1150. By the way, you're like, wait, my phone now has 4,000, 5,000, at least 3,000. That's correct. These phones were not battery kings. The BlackBerry, yeah, because they didn't do much compared to my phones. But the main thing is, you know what I had in my pocket or in my bag? An extra battery for any phone I had at the time. Because your phone will die. And you have to have a couple batteries, so you charge them up the night before and switch them out. But the Palm Pre also had a keyboard. So you would slide it and you have a keyboard. Keyboard wasn't as good as the BlackBerry, wasn't as good as my 700p. And did I get the Palm Pre? No. But I gotta give it respect because it was that phone. And guess what? You might never heard of WebOS, Palm Pre. If you have an LG TV, that interface, that's from Palm because HP bought them, did nothing with them, and then sold it to LG, and that's the software that the LG TVs, especially the OLED, still use to this day. 1 year later, Apple responds with the phone that changed the world again. We all know this is on the list. It is the iPhone 4. Why is the iPhone 4 on this list and basically every tech YouTuber, blogger, everybody's list of phones that still hit or that were different for their era? Because this phone was completely different. If you put an iPhone 3GS and an iPhone 4 in front of someone who's never seen a smartphone and ask them to describe, it's like Stone Age and Cyberpunk, basically. This is so advanced. So let's go back to the 3GS. 3GS, great phone, much faster than the 3G. And it's just there. Oh, by the way, the Palm Pre did have Wi-Fi. The Pitsy didn't, which was the next phone after that. So we are getting Wi-Fi in phones, but back to the 3G and 4. The 3GS and the 4. The 3GS had the same design as the 3G, which is similar to the original iPhone, the 2G as it's known. It has a regular screen on the front, touchscreen, the one button, alert slider, volume up and down, has a headphone jack at the top, and a plastic back that looks kind of like a pebble, kind of rounded plastic. After putting in and out the 30 pin, you get a crack down the middle. It's normal stuff, you know? It's an iPhone. Hey, we just got copy and paste on the year of the 3GS. So it's there, but there's a phone that was such a secret that was going to revolutionize the iPhone, and guess what? Someone left it in the bar. So back in the year 2010, we all knew about the iPhone 4 because somebody left it in the bar, somebody found it, and sold it to a review site. It was a whole big thing. But that's how much hype was behind this phone, and it deserved the hype. This phone came out and turned heads. Everyone wanted this phone. And that is the iPhone 4. And this is also one of the first iPhones with one of the biggest problems, aka antenna gate. What is antenna gate? Well, if you hold your phone like a normal person and make a call, your call would drop. It was on AT&T at the time, which had one of the worst receptions in the era. And guess what? The antennas are on the side of the phone. You're like, wait, Josh, isn't that where they are now? They're etched on the side of my phone. Those antennas on. Yes, this was the first phone to do it. The problem is, it was the first phone to do it, so it wasn't perfect. So when your hand covered it actually interfered with it, and you will actually lose bars. So there was like parody YouTube videos at the time, iHand, so you can hold your phone without dropping a call. So it was pretty funny. So Apple gave bumpers out for the phone. But now let's talk about the phone. The iPhone 4. It had what's called a retina display. What is a retina display? The PPI, pixels per inch, is a lot sharper, like retina quality. But let me tell you the display. So you've heard the displays we had. The hotness phone the year before, 320 by 480. The 3GS is something similar. I'm not going to look it up. The BlackBerry, 240 by 320. The iPhone 4 with the retina screen, 960 by 640. Guess what? The Apple A4 processor. Amazing processor that's just it at the time. Fastest iPhone yet, of course. 512 megs of RAM, 8 gig storage starting, up to 32 gigs. By the way, at this time, we didn't finance phones. You bought a phone either full price cash or you bought it on the 2-year subsidized price. So what does that mean? You're stuck in a contract. If you break the contract, you have to pay an early termination fee. So phones basically start out 200 for the base with the 2-year contract rather than the normal retail, which is like 650. Then 300 for the 16 gig and then 400 for the 32 gig. The camera. So you basically had a VJ camera on the previous model. You had a 5 megapixel rear camera. This was amazing because you can actually record high quality HD videos. By the way, HD is 720p. Full HD is 1080p. They changed it now, modern age, but HD is 720. So you can record 720 on this phone. And you know what else it had? A 0.3 megapixel camera. See, you're chuckling to yourself because you're like, oh, 0.3. What is 0.3? That's nothing. It's not even 1 megapixel. But here's the thing. Front-facing cameras weren't a thing in the year 2010. Apple goes, yo, we're putting a camera on the front. By the way, I mentioned about the Palm Pre, the BlackBerry. How would you take a selfie? You turned the phone around. On the BlackBerry Curve, it had a little, like, chrome-colored piece on the back piece right under the camera, and that's what's called a mirror. Yeah, so these old school phones had a piece that was like chromish, so you could see yourself, so you could take a selfie. The Palm Pre, when you slid it, the back was like metallic shiny metal, so you can see yourself. So that's how you took a selfie. Well, Apple goes, Steve Jobs. This is one of the last phones he was a part of in the release cycle. Of course, he knew about the 5, which was the phone 2 years later that he died in the year of the forest. But he said to his team probably, yo, we have that too on the back, Why not put a camera in the front? And they did. And this is what started FaceTime. We all know FaceTime to this day. We're all doing video calls on our phone. And this was the phone that brought FaceTime to us. And next year, we did have better specs. And guess what? The next year, Sprint got the iPhone. So I did have an iPhone 4 at this time. It was a great phone. But The iPhone 4 changed the game, and it was that phone that still hits different when you put it into retrospect. And the last phone I want to talk about, this is many years later. This is 2013. And it's a Samsung phone. Samsung, at this time, was essentially the number two phone maker for Android. Number one was HTC. HTC was king. They had the first Android phone with the T-Mobile G1, aka the HTC G1. They had the HTC G2, which was Sprint's first Android phone, which was the HTC Hero. They had the HTC Evo 4G, which I thought about putting on this list, which was, in my opinion, the iPhone competitor. What is that? Well, it was Sprint's best Android phone. And they had the HTC Thunderbolt, which was Verizon's best Android phone at the time, too. Phones that were meant to go head to head with the iPhone. Because the iPhone, after the 4, nothing was touching it. So manufacturers had to step up. HTC also had the first Nexus phone, which was the precursor to the Google Pixel line. But there's a phone everybody loves, and it's the Samsung S3, which is a great phone, which came out in the year 2012. But here's the thing. The S3 has that 720p screen. It's like a 4.7 inch. It's a great phone. But here's the thing. If you wait 1 year, you know what you get? The S4. And the S4 has a 5-inch Super AMOLED screen. AMOLED, what is it? It's an OLED in your hand. Basically what all high-end phones use now, OLED screens. You had that right there at full HD 1080p in your hand. It has TouchWiz, which at the time was bloated. It has so many apps, so many features you would never use. But guess what? It had the top of the line Snapdragon 600 series, 2 gigs RAM, 16 gig onboard, up to 64 gigs. But guess what? You had a micro SD card slot. This phone had features on features. Had that 13 megapixel shooter shooting 1080p, 2 megapixel front camera, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, anything you need, it had. This was a flagship, just like all of the phones I mentioned, but this Samsung hit different because the software experience on it. Samsung, the accessory line, you know what they had? This little flip out case. It had a little plastic window, but magnets. And guess what? You know, if you have an iPhone, if you put it on the MagSafe stand and you turn it, it goes into like a clock and stuff like that. Or how all of our phones now basically have an always on display. Guess what? With this little case, so you put it on the back and you cover your phone with that little window, you basically had like an always on display. So you could see the time. If a call came, you could just see who it is and you can answer or decline from there. Pretty cool. It had a dot matrix case as well. And it had the pogo pins on the back so you can get the wireless charging back. It was a great phone. And like this phone was the Android phone to get. It built up on what the S3 was. The S3 was Samsung getting it right. Because for the first Galaxy phone, each carrier had a different phone. The Sprint one had a sliding mechanism and a keyboard. Why? And they weren't universal. So Samsung, with the S2, they started making all the phones the same. The S3, they got the design right. But the S4 just polished it so much. And when I was talking about software and features, you had like the S Note app. You had a feature you can look at it and then scroll the page based on your eyes. Stuff you won't use, trust me. It'll be cool for the first 5 seconds and you stop. But you had Group Share, which was my favorite app at the time. Oh my god. On my note, I loved it because guess what? I'm watching a video. You want to watch the video with me? It's a hassle be, on top of each other. Hey, you have a Samsung? Open up group video. It's like share play. And we can both watch the same video together at the same time. Hey, we don't have a Bluetooth speaker. We're bored at work. Go get your Samsung phone. Okay, we're going to do a group audio share. So it's going to use both of our speakers to play the same exact song. That's how cool it was. And as I mentioned, it was just a phone at the time. And It was competing with the iPhone 5, bigger screen than the iPhone 5, higher resolution, and it was a thinner phone. And guess what? It worked. This was a longer episode, as you guys could clearly see, because I had fun with it. I love phones, I love tech, and guess what? I got to relive some great memories that I've honestly forgotten until I started talking about these phones. And if you made it to the end, thank you. So if you enjoyed this episode, hit that subscribe. If you want to hear more episodes like this, you might find one that you like. I don't always only talk about phones. And if you want to hear my take on the trifold, because I'm a folding phone user, I have posted that on booksbyjosh.com under the Tech with Josh section. And yes, I do have a site, Books by Josh, where you can find my signed PDFs of all my books, because I am also a writer. And if for some reason you want to hear my voice, I don't know why, you just listen to it for 30 minutes, you can also take a look at Books by Josh Audio Immersion or Manga with Josh. Those are my other podcasts. And if you just want to support me for some reason and buy me a coffee, I drink them black, no sugar, you can do that at buymeacoffee.com/booksbyjosh. That's it for now, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. See ya.